On this edition of Independent Sources, the big business of burying the dead.
The Mexican rituals are, they're very rich in their traditions. One unique aspect of the Mexican wakes that we have here, many times there'll be a mariachi band that will come in and play during the service.
And the sweet side of an old tradition.
So you attract the souls with the smell of the incense and with these flowers, the kind that we have here, the cempasúchil flowers, and then you feed them, you regale them.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Sarah Pizan. This week, we're marking the Day of the Dead, the Mexican celebration that highlights that culture's complicated relationship with the afterlife. Later on, we'll tell you about some of the rituals related to the celebration. We'll begin with a conversation about how Mexicans in New York repatriate the bodies of their dead. Before we go to Pierre-Pierre's interview with Mario Cuevas of the Mexican Consulate, we'll hear from Aaron Guijou. He's run a funeral home in Sunset Park, Brooklyn for several years and has helped many families send their loved ones home.
Historically speaking, Las Rosas Funeral Home has been repatriating deceased back to Mexico for over 30 years. We're an Hispanic firm. 95% of our business is serving Hispanic families. But we're very diverse. I mean, we serve the entire New York area. We also have a funeral home in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is also a very diverse Hispanic community. The Mexican rituals are, they're very rich in their traditions. One unique aspect of the Mexican wakes that we have here, many times there'll be a mariachi band that will come in and play during the service. The funeral's very important to them. The trends here in the United States, that's changing. The traditional funerals are sort of on a decline. The cremation rate is rising tremendously here in the States. It's pushing almost 45% throughout the States. So the Latin American communities are very different in that aspect. They want a full traditional funeral, a time to say goodbye and reflect and gather as a family to say goodbye. Besides helping the Mexican community, we're very helpful to the Guatemalan community, the Ecuadorian community, Central and South America. We do a tremendous amount of international shipping to these countries. The Mexican consulate, calls upon us, to help in very difficult situations, and we're there to help them because of our experience.
Consul Cuevas, the whole idea of sending the bodies back to Mexico, is that a recent phenomenon, or is it as whole as Mexican coming in this country?
Well, it's a recent phenomenon in terms of the practice to send bodies back to Mexico. Mexico has established a program to help the people with no resources to repatriate the bodies of their beloved ones.
Why is that important? Why is it so important to send a body of loved ones back to Mexico?
It's a very, very sensitive issue for the Mexican people because they leave home searching for a better life. They come here, they died or passed away, and they decided, the family decides to repatriate the body because that's where he belongs to. He goes back to the origin, their land.
So, what's the process like? How expensive it is, and who takes care of all of that? Okay,
we at the consulate, like in the other 49 consulates across the United States, which is a very large consular network, we try to help the families in Mexico or in the United States to repatriate the bodies. The process begins with the application or with the petition of the help to the consulate. And we have established a program funded by the Congress of Mexico with money in order to help these families. We make contact with the funeral homes. We have a panel of different funeral homes. We sign an agreement. They give us a special rate because it's very expensive, as you know.
Well, how much is it? I don't know how expensive it is.
Let me tell you something. It ranges in the average of $5,000–$6,000 to send a body to Mexico. We have signed this agreement.
Why is that? Why is it so expensive?
Because of the transportation, the preparation, and it's very expensive here in the United States, let me tell you. So Also, you have to go to the cemetery. Here, this is the price you pay. And we have to make the arrangements with the airline and the funeral home. Paperwork, it's not that expensive. We do everything at the consulate. We don't, sometimes there's not even a family member here in the United States, and we work with Mexican family in Mexico, and we do everything with the funeral home. And then we have this special agreement. It ranges about $2,000, $3,000, all included, and travels the body. We transported the body to Mexico City.
Over the years, have the numbers been increasing or decreasing? What are you seeing?
This is demographics. There are more population in Mexico at this time because of they're still coming, the newborns in the United States. And we have an average of 280 transfer of remains per year, which is increasing because there are more people, they pass away, they're getting older, they have problems, there are different reasons to die. And in our culture in Mexico, let me tell you that death is part of our lives. Since it's approaching, the day of the days is coming, so I think it's a very important issue. It comes with the culture.
Do you see more bodies going back as we get closer to Day of the Dead, or what's the connection between the Day of the Dead and sending the bodies back home?
Well, the only connection is because of the culture, but the thing is, we have a very steady amount of bodies per month. It's something like that. But because we have in Mexico with the Day of the Days, they celebrate and they really want their beloved to go back to Mexico because it comes with the culture. The family wants the body of the son, the father, the brother, the sister, the mother in Mexico. That's what we're trying to help because that's what they belong to.
Do you have a network of funeral homes we work with, or is there one in particular you work with, and why?
We have a network. I mean, it depends. We just go case by case. We sign an agreement, and we have about 8 funeral homes in the tri-state area. We work with them, and they do the paperwork, and we help the people. So the family goes. The only reason is the Mexican family who has going through this tragedy, they don't have to sign any agreement with the funeral. We have to do that again because this is the agreement.
And you say a lot of times there are even parents of these people here. How do you know about the deaths? How do you know that the body needs to go back to Mexico?
Sometimes because the family, they know that they have some relative who passed away. Hospitals, we are informed about the death. And the family members, either in Mexico or here in the United States, they say, well, I want the body of my relative to be transported back to Mexico. We know by the media, sometimes the police. So, but we make contact with the family. That's a requirement. We don't transfer remains without the knowledge and the approval of the family.
The question, I guess, is: are there Mexicans being buried here? Is every Mexican who dies in the United States go back to Mexico?
Not all of them. Some of the people, they already have a life here with the children, or some they are already established here. There are many now, more and more every day, and they decided to be born because they want to stay here with the children. By the time the children grow up, they're gonna come and visit them to the cemetery as Mexicans, but here in the United States.
And you mentioned earlier that you do have a budget for that. How much is that budget a year? Is this?
It depends. I mean, according to the funds, we're talking about $250,000 per year.
And that goes to paying exactly what?
We pay from the very beginning. As soon as we know, from that we make contact with the funeral home, and then they go and get the body from the medical examiner, the hospital, wherever it is, and then they prepare the body. And they make all the arrangements, physical arrangements for the preparation of the body, and we work on all the details. It's a very, very dignified way to do it, and then we have so with about almost $300,000 per year, and it's over $500,000, so to speak, in total.
One last question: do you have special arrangement with the airline companies to give you a discount and to handle the body in a special way?
Yes, they have special compartments at the plane. So we work with them. With few of them, like Aeromexico, we work with them because it's a direct flight. And sometimes we make the work with all the funeral home works directly with them, either way.
Consul Cuevas, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Still to come, a flagship airline and its role in an ethnic ritual. Before that, Abby Ishola has some other news.
Thanks, Sarah. Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic and community media. From El Diario La Prensa, Latino nonprofits are facing a crisis as many are being mismanaged and public funding continues to dwindle. While many of the city's nonprofits rely on private donations, Latino organizations are kept afloat with public funding. Smaller Latino organizations with limited resources are now competing with larger organizations for grants from the city as a result of the economic downturn and some of Mayor Bloomberg's policies. Some Latino organizations have folded up because of mismanaging their funding. An international phenomenon known as cash mobs has made its way to Washington Heights. North Hatton reports that a cash mob has been assembled in the area to bring dollars and attention to local small businesses. Cash mobs are made up of large groups of people who go to struggling local businesses to shop in hopes of increasing profits and enticing potential customers. The groups in Washington Heights were formed by the Uptown Community Church, which has done 7 cash mobs once a month since last year. Anywhere from 30 to 100 people have participated. From Voices of New York, lessons on farming have become a hit among students in Bushwick. High schoolers and adult volunteers are working together on an urban farm project designed to teach teenagers healthy eating habits and how to grow their own foods. Many of the participants say the program has changed the way they feel about vegetables and eating well. The project is located at the Bushwick Campus Farm at the Bushwick Educational Campus. When it comes to technology, many people of color are consumers and not producers. Color Lines reports that out of more than 600,000 people employed as computer and information systems managers, less than 6% are Black and only 5% are Latino. A Reuters study found that white males who attend Harvard, Stanford, and MIT receive the most funding from venture capitalists to start technology companies. This while researchers find that people of color are the fastest growing users of smartphones and social media, and more likely than whites to use technology to keep up with what's happening in their neighborhoods. And finally, the Lower East Side's last kosher eatery has closed down after a decade of business. Noah's Ark was once one of many thriving kosher eateries that served the historical Jewish immigrant neighborhood, but its recent closure marks the end of that era brought on by gentrification. The older and more traditional Jews who remain in the area are less interested in dining out than younger Jews in the Upper West Side area, where kosher dining is blossoming. Those were just a few headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. Independent Sources will be back right after this.
Thanks for staying tuned to our special Day of the Dead episode. Earlier, we talked about how many Mexicans send the bodies of their dead back home. You may be surprised to know that many Jewish families have the same practice. Gary Pierre-Pierre sat down with Danny Sadan, the Vice President and General Manager of Israel's flagship carrier, El Al Israel Airlines. They talked about the airline's role in that ritual.
Danny, a lot of immigrants in New York love to be buried, want to be buried back home, and many of them do. But in the case of Jews, there's a certain element of a time clock in this process. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, according to the Jewish religion, you should be buried as early as possible. You should not, as a Jew, you should not keep a body of a dead person anywhere, but you have to bury it as soon as you can.
And so in the case of repatriating a body, how does El Al work to make sure that it's keeping within the religious tradition?
When you're in Israel, usually you bury everybody within 24 hours. And that 24 hours just to give time to advise the families and everything else to congregate and come to the funeral. But if you die in Jerusalem, then you must be buried immediately. So outside of Jerusalem, graveyards are closed at night, but in Jerusalem itself, even if you die in the evening, they will bury you the same night, because Jerusalem is a holy city where the temple used to be. So you're not allowed to keep bodies apart from only after buried. They have to be buried as quickly as possible. With Jews outside of Israel, a lot of Jews want to be buried in Israel for a few reasons. First of all, if one day the Messiah will come, and he will come, and all the Jews will live in Israel, so everybody wants his body to be there. And the other reason is, if you see, there are acts of anti-Semitism in Europe especially, where you have a lot of vandalism and people are destroying tombs, especially Jewish tombs and things like that. So people want to be buried when they can afford it and They have some family in Israel, so they make arrangements to be buried in Israel. What they do is usually they contact the consulate here, the Israeli consulate, to get the paperwork done. And then they contact the graveyards in Israel to make sure there is a lot available. And then they contact El Al, and with these two certificates, one from the consulate and one from the graveyard in Israel, they come to the airport and we transfer.
Is there anything special you have to do with the body to make sure that it follows certain religious rules and orders? Or just
as far as El Al is concerned, we don't. But you will not have a coffee getting to the airport without being taken care of previously, because there is a company or organization called Chevrat Kadisha, which they are dealing only with graveyards and only with bodies. So once a person dies, so they have to wash him and clean him and do whatever they want and whatever they need, and make sure that everything is in order. And they have a special coffin that is used for transporting by air.
But also, from what I understand, there are some people who cannot fly if there's a dead body on board. How do you deal with that to make sure that the people who have those religious restrictions, there's no conflict there, that you're serving everyone?
Yes, that's a good question, because today we have 3 daily flights from JFK and 1 daily flight from Newark. Now, people which are called Kohanim, which used to be the priests that took care of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, they are not allowed to be around or in the vicinity of a body. And even if there is a funeral, they're not allowed to get into the graveyard. They can come up to the gates of the graveyard, even if it's their own family. They have to wait outside the graveyard, and they are not allowed to come in. So what happens, everybody knows that from Newark we never transport coffins.
Okay.
Coffins are transported only from JFK Airport.
Okay.
And even at JFK, it's a lot of organization, a lot of logistics, because, for instance, we have a lot of people flying with live animals, like somebody's carrying a dog, which goes in the belly. So we're not allowed to have a dog and a body at the same time. So the body comes before anybody else, before anything else. If we have to take cargo off, we take cargo off. If there is an animal, we take him off and we put him on a different flight. So we make sure that the body is well taken care of and the coffee is very well protected. And regarding the Kohens, the people which are called Kohen, they ask us usually if there is a coffin on board. And if the answer is yes, then if they want to move, then we allow them to transfer to a different flight without paying any
extra
charges or extra or whatever.
Now, how big is this? How often do you have a body, or what's the most body you've ever had on a flight?
The most body had on one flight was 4. But on generally, I think we have at least 2 or 3 a week. Every week we have 2 or 3 coffins flying to Israel.
And how much do you charge for this? What's the fee to transport?
Usually it's a set fee. It's $2,200 to take a coffin from the United States to Israel.
And does that include the people or person who's accompanying the body as well?
No, that's only for the coffin, because we have a pallet which is built only for the coffin and nothing else. We don't take anything else around the coffin. What we make arrangements, even if the flight is full, so the immediate family that has to fly, we will make sure they fly, even if we have to find volunteers or pay money for others to come off the flight and put the immediate family on the flight so they can get there. Because once you land in Israel, you go straight to the graveyard for the funeral, so you cannot afford leaving the family behind.
Okay.
They must be on the same flight as the coffin, yeah.
And El Al, is known for its security. How and why it became known for that?
Unfortunately, for the wrong reasons. That's the way it works in life. Because of the political situation in Israel and because of the terrorism around the world, we were the first airline to be threatened. And we were threatened as early as 1968. So that's
you've been used to this?
Unfortunately, we got used to it. And people say, how come El Al is an expert? It's an expert because we've been doing it for almost 50 years. We've been doing this job. So we started by doing things that today look incredible. We used to open the bag of every passenger that came to the flight. Everyone used to open, close, searching. Took hours and hours and hours. But we develop techniques that make it much easier for everybody, for the airline to be more secure and for the passenger to have less disturbance with his flight. So it takes a while. That's why we ask people to come early to the airport.
Well, yeah, you need that 2 hours.
Yes, yeah, even 3 hours, yeah. Yeah, even 3 hours. We have trained security people in every airport. So on top of what the local authorities in each country do, we do an additional check that we need to do ourselves.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fascinating subject. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
When we come back, the cross-culture appeal of the Day of the Dead. Welcome back. We've told you a lot about the practical rituals associated with repatriating those who have passed away. So now, we'd like to end on some lighter notes. Despite the morbid name, the Day of the Dead is about connecting Mexicans with their deceased loved ones. It's also about celebrating life and poking fun at the living. It's often celebrated with food, and it begins with a simple type of bread. Here in Sunset Park, Braulio Contla has been baking hojaldas, monas, and rosquetes for more than 7 years.
Estas son como unas canillitas de muerto, más o menos. Significa un muerto.
Un muerto así.
Sí, cruzado de brazos.
They're traditional pan de muerto, a special bread eaten on the days of the dead. They're part of an important Mexican holiday celebrated on the 1st and 2nd of November. It's meant to commemorate loved ones that have passed. Throughout the month of October, Contla and his 5 bakers make about 1,500 of these per day.
De huevo, nuez, canela.
The breads are part of a ritual that dates back to the 12th century. The holiday puts a Mexican twist on a Catholic celebration. It combines All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day with pre-Columbian period rituals for the dead.
Typically, this was the time of the year when people return, and still is the time of the year when people return to their hometown. And they return to their hometown, and the altar of their dead connects them to their family, to their town. So it's always been powerful for migrants, and sometimes a little sad for migrants when they can't go back. There's a feeling of longing for your people that comes on these days.
Claudio Lomnitz wrote a book about Mexicans and their relationship with death. He was born in Chile, but grew up in Mexico. He adopted the ritual early on. Every year, he places multiple pan de muertos on his altar. This celebration can get a bit pricey. Some families save all year just to buy what's needed for their altar. Because according to the tradition, these elements are crucial to bringing back their loved ones, and there's only a small window to do so.
Our family, they have one day to return their souls to the earth. We cannot see them, but we believe that they can see us. So we start to prepare the altars here.
You offer them food and water, typically, as well as copal, traditionally, which is a tree sap that is used as an incense that helps communicate what happens in this world with the other world. So you attract the souls with the smell of the incense and with these flowers, the kind that we have here, the cempasúchil flowers, and then you feed them, you regale them.
You regale them with food and drinks they used to enjoy. But it's not all about the bread and the beer. Here at Don Paco Lopez Panaderia in Sunset Park, they've been making pan de muerto for 3 generations. But they're also selling calaveras de azúcar, sugar skulls, meant to commemorate the dead on El Día de los Muertos.
It's also something that they cannot miss in the altar, because we have to see the life the way it is. You have to celebrate this, and what else to have a piece of sugar to sweet your life.
The sugar skulls and skeletons, or catrinas, are part of a more political part of the holiday. It's believed the souls of the dead witness humanity's collective mistakes and come back to criticize the living.
In the 19th century, they used it to lampoon politicians, for example, to criticize the rich, things like that. In the 20th century, and even to today, we have a lot of Days of the Dead to criticize, for example, U.S. immigration policy.
The political criticism may change throughout the years, but the ritual and its significance remain the ultimate representation of Mexicans' complicated relationship with death. Finally, New York artist Diogenes Balcher is honoring civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr. with an exhibit at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. Judith Escalona tells us more about the Altar of Freedom in this report.
Altar of Freedom, Opening Paths in All Directions, is a tribute to Martin Luther King on the Day of the Dead. The art installation is currently exhibiting at the University of Notre Dame's Crossroads Gallery for Contemporary Art.
The University have a whole program, part of the Department of the Africana series, on the whole issue of civil rights and the Martin Luther King.
The New York-based artist is known for his prints, paintings, and multimedia installations that explored African diasporic themes in the Caribbean while incorporating diverse cultural artifacts. With the Altar of Freedom, Ballester offers new perspectives on King.
I make a parallelism between the Martin Luther King mission in open the path for many people with the Elegua, with African deity, which is part of his root, that many people don't talk about it. You see, and this association I found it very interesting, you know, how the African identity can come from the African-American perspective and from the African perspective and the Caribbean perspective.
The Altar of Freedom is a transcultural multimedia installation in the form of an altar with a large painting of King at its center. Found objects and sacred effigies related to the Mexican Virgin of Guadalupe and the African deity Elegua, the keeper of paths, surround the portrait.
That symbol, that when people reflect on it, is not just Martin Luther King. The symbol for me is about the freedom of this country, not the manipulation of culture, but the idea of sharing together, and growing together, you know, not the economic manipulation of people.
Day of the Dead altars are called ofrendas, the Spanish word for offering. Ballester invites visitors to the gallery to offer gifts to the slain civil rights leader in the form of shoes, rosaries, pictures of deceased relatives, and keys. People can also make virtual offerings by sharing their thoughts about Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement online at diogenes-ballester.com. Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
That's all for a special episode marking the Day of the Dead. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.